Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to some more Pokemon action. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're going to be finishing off the Learning Competitive series. Now, this episode is going to be discussing the art of battling, and a lot of what goes into battling is game knowledge and predictions and trying to figure out how exactly to approach a battle. And the thing about this concept is that it's going to be very difficult to copy. It's something that you learn as you play, so this is more of an example and a walk through what to look for when you're looking into a battle. I'm going to be using two replays. One is going to be a doubles OU from myself that I don't even remember how it went because this was from many months ago, and one from, I hope I searched it up right, That's a Plus One, who also works on YouTube, and I'll link his channel in the description below. He allowed me to use any of his replays. So let's get started. So there's a bunch of core elements. Now this is the screen you won't be seeing on a Wi-Fi battle. I'll throw up a picture now to show you what a Wi-Fi battle loading screen looks like. But basically, the most important part to starting a battle is team preview. Now, what team preview is it shows you all of the Pokemon that both you and your opponent owns. So, for example, me on the top side has Ferrothorn, Gastrodon, Camerupt, Dusclops, Cresselia, and Tyranitar, while my opponent on the other side has Amistar, Politoed, Kabutops, Mawile, Amoonguss, and Tornadus. Now, what you have to do at Team Preview is a bunch of different things. First, the most primary of things is decide what your opponent wants to do with his team. So from my perspective, my opponent has a very obvious Rain team. The strengths lie in getting Rain up for Amistar and Kabutops, who both have Swift Swim. The Rain also helps both the Mawile and the Amoonguss avoid their most common weakness, Fire. And on top of that, it helps Tornadus get off powerful stab hurricanes with 100% accuracy. So with that in mind, you have to consider what are your team's strengths weaknesses. Now, my team is very obviously a Trick Room. You've got Dusclops and Cresselia, the Trick Room setters, and you can sort of kind of guess that the team's built around Camerupt because you've got the Gastrodon to take the water type moves, and you've got, you know, Sand to get rid of Rain and Sun and all that jazz. But you have to look at the teams and compare your strengths to their weaknesses. So for me, when I look at this team, I have to think, how am I going to beat the Rain? What do I have to beat the Mawile? What do I have to beat the Amoonguss? What happens if he starts off Amoonguss and I start off with, say, Camerupt? So the first turn is you figuring out a good lead. So as you see, he starts off Politoed and I start off... He starts off Politoed and Amistar, and I start off Cresselia and Camerupt. So you might be wondering, why would I start off Camerupt against a Rain team? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons for that. Part of my team is relying on Camerupt to bait out a water type move to switch into my Gastrodon to get a +1. So, fully expecting him to either start the Rain mode with Politoed and Kabutops, or to start something like Amoonguss and Mawile, Camerupt was really the obvious choice here. It baits out the water type attacks, it baits out the Gastrodon switching in and all that. So when you get into the first turn, you have to think to yourself, what is my opponent going to do? Well, first turn, you don't really know what the team is running, you don't really know how it works. So the opponent might be thinking, well, if I just, kill the Camerupt, that's going to be good, right? So basically, the whole how to approach a battle is how to approach what your lead is and how to make it work correctly. Now, you'll hear me talk a lot in my normal videos about pressure and momentum and all of that, and those are really important concepts to understand. I think that out of, like, for example, Trick Room, there's a way to do it right and there's a way to do it wrong. The best way to do it is to start out for the high pressure lead. Camerupt and Cresselia are a very high pressure lead. The reason for that is Cresselia cannot be one-hit KO'd by pretty much 99% of the meta. Not a single thing can one-hit KO it. outside of, you know, some very rare choices. So that means they have to either double into the Cresselia and avoid the Camerupt, or they double into the Camerupt and let the Trick Room get up. And that's why you have to consider your leads carefully, because if you start off with something like a Ferrothorn and a Smeargle, it may be a really good lead for you. They may have Pokemon that literally cannot do anything to you. However, there's no offensive pressure, and once you set up whatever it is you're setting up, you're going to have a very tough time carrying that forward. So you need pressure from both the defensive and the offensive side. Now, I'm talking about doubles, but this also works for singles. If you start off with a Pokemon that is a jack of all trades, like let's just say an Azelf. Azelf, it has a lot of different choices. It can explode, it can set up stealth rocks, it can U-turn, it could psychic, it could trick. That's a high pressure lead. Something that if your opponent starts something that's very strong against Azelf, you just U-turn out there, build up momentum into a stronger switch in for that weakness. Or if it starts off with something that's a really high valuable target that an explosion can definitely kill, you just created your team a huge amount of pressure and momentum because you got rid of their incredibly strong Pokemon, but now you didn't really lose too much off of that. So leads are really important. You have to consider the enemy's team's strengths and weaknesses, your team's strengths and weaknesses. You have to consider how this lead will carry you through the rest of the game. And this is why when you see me using this Trick Room team on my channel a lot, you'll see me using this lead 9 times out of 10. It is a very high pressure team, and if I have a bad lead, I have a bunch of different switch-ins that work that can carry my momentum forward. So, that all said, you have to look at this lead and think of what the best option is. Now, I haven't seen this battle in a really long time, so I have no idea what's going to happen, but my main thought here is that I would switch out the Camerupt for Gastrodon. Gastrodon comes in, takes either 1 or 2 water-type attacks, gets to +1 or +2, and I get a Trick Room gone. I'm expecting the Politoed to either Protect or to Scald or Hydro Pump, and I'm expecting the same thing from the Amistar. So let's hit play. Let's see what happens here. I end up staying in. I go for the Protect. Muddy Water comes out, which is actually a lot of damage, and I get the Trick Room off. So as you can see, you don't always have to follow the same sort of protocol. Had I switched into the Gastrodon there, I actually would have lost a lot of pressure. By utilizing the Protect, I guarantee my Trick Room to be set up because, you know, again, not a single thing, nothing on this field can one-hit KO a Cresselia. So I guarantee the Trick Room up, okay? I guarantee my Camerupt is alive, and now I can sort of start to think, okay, well, what am I gonna do here? One thought is that you have to consider base stats. Now, you think back to Amistar. Amistar is a very strong and relatively fast Pokemon who is dubbed a sweeper. What this means is that there's a good chance it's going to be carrying a Focus Sash or an offensive item. Now, we saw its attack go off and no offensive item procced. We didn't see a Life Orb, and we didn't see like a plate or something like that. We didn't see anything. So we either assume Focus Sash or a choice item. So from here, we have to consider our strengths wisely. Do I swap out my Cresselia for Gastrodon, who can't protect us from the Muddy Water? Or do I just assume he's going to do the exact same play, Earth Power the Amistar and Psychic it just in case it's Focus Sash? And that's, I think, what I actually do. That's what I would do. So I Earth Power it, he is not Focus Sash, he dies straight, and I Psychic. So right there, and he sends out Tornadus at the end. So right there, that's how you enable a lead and a clean sweep, alright? You take in the information that you have and you use it for yourself. So I use Earth Power because it's super effective, right? So that's guaranteed to one-hit KO an Amistar. No matter who you are, what you're thinking, that's going to KO the Amistar. And you have to think, well, you're probably sitting there wondering, well, what if the Politoed attacked the Camerupt? There's always a chance that will happen. But you have to consider how the opponent's judging their lead. That Muddy Water did 65% of my Cresselia's health. Another one would kill it for sure. So if I were to say swap in Gastrodon for Camerupt, yeah, it won't kill my Gastrodon, but it will kill my Cresselia, and the rest of my team doesn't really do too hot. So, you know, you gotta consider your leads, you gotta understand, you have to do, like, basically risk management. Is it worth it to lose Gastrodon to kill an Amistar? Or is it not? So that's about it. So now we're in a position where it's Politoed and Tornadus. So now I have to assess, okay, do I keep my Cresselia alive? Do I go for an Ice Beam onto the Tornadus? Do I go for an Earth Power? The most obvious play here is to switch out Cresselia for Gastrodon in case the Politoed goes for a Scald or a Hydro Pump, and then go for, say, either an Ancient Power onto the Tornadus or an Earth Power onto the Politoed. So let's see what happens. I do switch out the Cresselia, and I do bring in the Gastrodon, and I go for an Ancient Power onto the Tornadus. Now, you may be wondering, well, why would you go for Ancient Power onto the Tornadus instead of the Politoed, who's a Water type, and more of a threat to your Camerupt? Well, again, you have to reference the stats, the move pool, the typing, and all of that of the enemy Pokemon. And, you know, you also have to have a good understanding of what these Pokemon generally want to do. So Politoed generally runs Protect, Support Move, Stab Attack, Filler. Filler tends to be support, such as like Encore or Perish Song, sorry. So generally speaking, it will only have a Water type move. So with that in mind, I don't have to focus on the Politoed, because as long as Gastrodon is alive, a Politoed with only a Water type move cannot do a single thing to my team. However, Tornadus works both inside and outside of the rain, without the team, with the team. So if I get rid of the Tornadus as soon as possible, that's one less threat for my team. And as you see, he goes for the Encore, so that sort of guarantees to me, or assures me, that that's what he has. Now, this turn, instead of attacking the Tornadus, I go for an Earth Power on the Politoed. It almost kills the Politoed and doesn't kill him, but the Ice Beam from the Gastrodon does. Now, unfortunately for my opponent, I don't think he realized that Storm Drain was a field effect, so he probably went for Scald on the Camerupt. You live, you learn. Not a lot of people play Gastrodon, so taking advantage of a sort of surprise Pokemon, or a pocket pick, as they would say, is actually a pretty good thing, and that's some sort of strategy that you might want to rely on. That's why I like Gastrodon a lot. Not a lot of people really expect the Gastrodon to switch in and actually absorb the attack that wasn't even aimed at it. So that's pretty cool. So that's like a perfect turn for us. Now in comes the Amoonguss. Now this is where things get a little dicey. Amoonguss is very well known for its Spore spam. Spore is a 100% accurate move, it cannot miss, and it guarantees a Pokemon to be put to sleep. In addition to that, it's Grass type, which means that it's super effective against my Gastrodon. So now you have to put even more expertise into the field. You'll have your full team. I have my Camerupt, I have my Gastrodon, I have my Cresselia, and I have whatever my fourth Pokemon is. Actually, no, wait, I'm sorry. This is 6v6, so it's actually, I have the entire team, all 6 of them, and he only has 4. So I have to consider, this thing might put me to sleep. I think it's pretty obvious that it's going to try and put me to sleep. Camerupt, though, in speed tiers, is actually one of the slowest competitively viable Pokemon in the game. It's actually, I think, tied with Amoonguss, or it's ever so slightly slower. So knowing that, I have to think, do I drop an Earth Power here? Do I drop an Earth Power Ice Beam onto the Amoonguss and just avoid the Politoed? Because again, we know that it only has Scald so far, and whatever else it has, it might potentially have Ice Beam, is not big of a threat. So do I double into the Amoonguss? Do I kill the Politoed and switch out something? We'll find out. He goes for Rage Powder, I go for Earth Power, and I go for Ice Beam. So I think it's safe to assume that I actually did double into that, but either way, it still worked out in my favor. Amoonguss didn't get a chance to attack. Politoed again went for Scald, I guess not expecting the Storm Drain to pop again, I don't know why, and I almost killed the Amoonguss. Trick Room's out, and the good thing about Trick Room being out right here is that once the Trick Room goes out, I know for a fact that my Gastrodon's going to be faster than this Amoonguss. It's pretty obvious unless the Amoonguss is running a lot of speed, which it most likely isn't, so I'm safe to just Earth Power the Politoed and Ice Beam the Amoonguss. So I Ice Beam the Amoonguss, I Earth Power the Politoed, and now it's 2v6. So he brings out Mawile and Kabutops. Now, you sit back and you think, okay, what can these things do to me? Kabutops, as long as Gastrodon's on the field, it can't do very much. It can go for a Rock-type move, but Gastrodon resists it, and Camerupt is neutral to it, so I don't expect it to kill. If he still doesn't understand how Storm Drain works, he can go for a Waterfall and make me +3. And then you have to think, okay, well, what does the Mawile do? Well, the Mawile can Sucker Punch me, it can Play Rough me, it can Iron Head me. I resist all of that except for Sucker Punch, and Sucker Punch should not kill me, so I think a Scald Earth Power might be in order. So he Mega Evolves and he protects. He does go for the Waterfall, again, forgetting about Storm Drain. You know, sometimes you get that. I do Earth Power the Mawile, but I also Earth Power the Kabutops, and it dies. So now I'm in a... Okay, so I'm gonna pause it right there. So at the end of the game, towards the end of the game, there's something important to note that you also have to note in the beginning of the game. What is your win condition? So something I didn't say in the beginning is, what is your win condition? So looking at this team, what would be my win condition? My win condition is very easily Gastrodon. Gastrodon is the win condition. I can switch it into 3 out of 6 of their Pokemon exceptionally easily. I can KO 2 out of the 6 Pokemon exceptionally easily. That's the Mawile and the Tornadus. And I do relatively decently well against the Amoonguss. So Gastrodon's the win condition, and you have to consider that when the win condition is there, you have to preserve it. So if we go to the last turn, let's just, yeah, right here. So if we go here, the way this turn plays out is that I don't really have to do any thinking. If there's only 1 Pokemon left and you have 2 Pokemon on the field, all you have to do is just double straight into it, right? So this turn, I would 100% without a doubt go for Earth Power twice onto the Mawile. Because if he kills my Camerupt, the Gastrodon gets the kill, because it's at +3. I mean, there's no way it's not going to kill. If he kills the Gastrodon, the Camerupt will maybe get the kill, possibly, most likely. But if it doesn't get the kill, then my win condition in the back is Ferrothorn, because Mawile can't do anything to Ferrothorn. So there's a lot of different things that go into a battle. The most important part is understanding where your opponent wants to go with his team and how you can take advantage of that yourself. And that's going to be that battle. We're going to move on to this one. This is from Thatsa. He's on the top. So his team is Xerneas. This is for VGC 2016, so it's a slightly different format. You've got Xerneas, Groudon, Weavile, Smeargle, Jumpluff, and Salamence against Gardevoir, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Raichu, Landorus, and Talonflame. So here, you have to, you look at both sides. So the enemy, the Kamuk 9-2, his win condition is basically Kyogre. That's his team doesn't really have too much in the way of answer to a Kyogre. Xerneas can get a Geomancy off and survive and beat in a 1v1, but you know, you gotta think, okay, so the Kyogre is going to be the most important Pokemon on the enemy team. How can he work around the Kyogre? Well, one of the easiest ways to work around a Kyogre in VGC 16 is to swap in a Groudon as it goes for a Water-type move, because that will bring the Desolate Land in, and that will negate all Water-type attacks. So, when you're considering for something like VGC, where you C6 but only bring 4, you have to not only figure out your win condition, but you also have to figure out the best combination of your team that will work against their team. So, for example, if I were to predict, I'd say maybe he would start off with Xerneas and Smeargle. What Xerneas and Smeargle allows him to do is that if he starts off with, say, Rayquaza does not want to stay in versus Xerneas. So that basically forces a switch or a protect. Smeargle forces a lot of things with Dark Void. So, like, obviously I might not be right. I've never seen this battle before, ever. But you really have to, like, wage what your strongest threat is, how you can build up momentum, how you can get enough pressure. So, like, look at, like, one of the best ways to figure out pressure is how many Pokemon can my one Pokemon kill. So Salamence, for example, let's just say it's a special Salamence, right? So it has Hyper Voice, Flamethrower, Draco Meteor, and Protect. So that's electric. Did I say electric? No. That's fire, dragon, and flying, right? So fire kills nothing on his team. Flying is super effective against nothing on his team. Dragon is super effective against one thing, but is also immune. So you look at the Salamence and you're like, well, you know, if I'm running a special Salamence, I don't really think that's going to be a very good option against this team. I'm not going to bring it. So then you move on to Jumpluff. Well, I don't really personally know too much about Jumpluff, but I assume it has Taunt. I assume it has a bunch of supporting moves. So you're like, well, okay. If he starts off with Talonflame, my Jumpluff is useless. If he starts off with Fake Out Raichu and Kyogre, my Jumpluff is useless. If he starts off with Landorus, I don't really think my Jumpluff is going to do very much against that. So you're like, well, you know what, maybe Jumpluff isn't really the best option here. So then you move on to Smeargle. Smeargle is always a good option because the Dark Void attack is just going to be good. So you're like, okay, Smeargle is most likely my lead. I'm going to lead off with Smeargle. What am I going to lead off Smeargle with? So, excuse me, you look at Weavile. Weavile is a pretty decent option. It has a faster Fake Out than Raichu. Has super effective against Landorus and Rayquaza. And even though it doesn't really want to take a Brave Bird, if you have the Groudon in the back, it can stop the Brave Bird. And it can stop the Kyogre. So, realistically, Smeargle Weavile is actually a pretty solid start. So we're going to get into this, and like, it's hard to explain because it's just something that you do, but you really have to compare your Pokemon to their Pokemon, and unfortunately, you don't really have much time on Wi-Fi. Thankfully on Showdown you have a lot of time, but on Wi-Fi you don't have a lot of time, so you have to do this quickly. You have to be like, alright, this does that, this does that, this does that. Okay, this is my best option, I'm going to pair it with this because that has the best combinations, and so on and so forth. So, the first turn is going to be Rayquaza and Gardevoir versus Weavile and Xerneas. So, now you're in the game, you have to think, what do I do from here? Weavile has Fake Out. Actually, wait, let's just play this really quick. Okay, so Weavile has Fake Out. Gardevoir, we just learned Traced Fairy Aura, so its Moonblast is gonna hurt. And we know that there's a Rayquaza on the field. So the first order of business is, what do I do with my Pokemon? Do I Fake Out the Rayquaza to guarantee that my Xerneas gets a Geomancy off? Do I just go straight for a move like Icicle Crash to hope that the Rayquaza goes down? Because if I ignore the Gardevoir will most likely take out my Weavile. Or do I just go for a Moonblast from Xerneas and go for a Fake Out on the Gardevoir? So you gotta consider, like, okay, so if you were to say do the latter and just straight up attack the Rayquaza and Fake Out the Gardevoir, how would that turn out? Well, you first have to realize that Rayquaza is actually faster than Xerneas. So if you end up doing that, Rayquaza will indeed go first. And what he does depends on what he wants to do. He can switch out, he can stay in and go for a really powerful Dragon Ascent on your Xerneas. And now you have a Xerneas that's most likely going to be below half for a Rayquaza that you killed. So that's what you have to think about. Now I'm assuming that a smart player would protect the Rayquaza and try and kill the Weavile. So let's see what happens here. So we see the Fairy Aura, Mega Gardevoir. So once you see the Mega Gardevoir, you're like, all right, that Rayquaza is not Mega Evolving. So he fakes out the Gardevoir, and he goes for Geomancy. So turn one, he predicted either the Rayquaza to protect, which is a pretty solid prediction, or he predicted the Rayquaza to switch out. So this is what I'm talking about with gathering your strengths and trying to build momentum. By not falling into the trap of faking out the Rayquaza, he ends up faking out the Gardevoir, removing all of the Gardevoir's damage for a turn. Because remember, Gardevoir actually is pretty strong with Hyper Voice. And not bothering with the Rayquaza, because even though the Rayquaza is at +2 right now, it can't kill either of these two Pokemon. So, we'll see what happens here. Xerneas is going to protect, and we're going to see an Ice Punch come off onto the Rayquaza. So, knowing that not only is Xerneas faster, but Weavile is faster, he decided to take advantage of the Rayquaza and go for a straight kill on the Rayquaza. Now, it does have a Focus Sash, so it doesn't die. However, it's still in his favor. We're going to see Hyper Voice come off. Weavile does go down, but do notice, the Dragon's Temp comes off, but do notice that the Gardevoir ended up being faster than the Rayquaza, and that's something to remember. You always have to pay attention to who's faster than who, how does this work, and so on. So now, sends out Salamence, which gets an Intimidate off. So Rayquaza is now at +1. You got a Salamence on the field, who's most likely going to be slower than the Gardevoir, but a Xerneas who's actually going to be faster than both of them and can take a hit from the Hyper Voice. So, what would you do in this situation? Personally, I'd go for a Dazzling Gleam and maybe a Protect on the Salamence. So Mega Evolve, we are going to see a critical hit with the Extreme Speed. Dazzling Gleam does not take out the Gardevoir, and unfortunately the Salamence does go down. So, like I said, had he gone for the Protect there, most likely, I don't know if he has it or not, I don't know his team, but me personally, I would have gone for Dazzling Gleam Protect, but he obviously didn't. So now we're in an interesting position. Xerneas and Smeargle versus Gardevoir and Raichu. So how does he preserve the possible momentum that he has going right now? Well, we know for a fact that a Dazzling Gleam will kill the Gardevoir. We also know for a fact that the Raichu can't have Focus Sash because the rules prevent multiple items. So a Dazzling Gleam will most likely kill the Raichu. But the caveat is that Raichu, unfortunately, is faster than Smeargle, so if he wants to fake out the Xerneas, he can. So you have to consider that in your mind when we're going into this. What would you do? Personally, I would protect the Xerneas and go for a Dark Void, if I'm running that. Because the fake out on the Xerneas is a lot stronger than the fake out on the Smeargle. Sure, he'll take out the Smeargle with a Hyper Voice fake out, but a +2 Xerneas Dazzling Gleam will most likely take out both the Gardevoir and the Raichu. So let's see what goes on. He does fake out the Xerneas. No, okay, sorry, he goes for Feint on the Xerneas, and the Dazzling Gleam comes off, and they both die. Now, even worse for the opponent, we now have 2 +2 Xerneases on the field. Now, this is something that we would call a risky play. This is honestly a very risky play, because by not protecting the Xerneas, you are unfortunately leaving yourself open to a Protect and a Hyper Voice. However, by protecting the Xerneas, he also left him open to a Feint and a Hyper Voice. So this is where the game really comes into play, and this is really where paying attention really helps. You see a Xerneas on the field that's +2 next to a Smeargle. You have to think to yourself, this Xerneas can one-shot my entire team. I am terrified. Do you go for the fake out, expecting the Protect, or do you go for the Feint, expecting the Protect? Because let's be real here, you're not going to be attacking the Smeargle. There's no point in attacking the Smeargle because the Smeargle is slower than everything. So if you want to kill the Xerneas, you rather kill the Xerneas. So by him going for Feint, he's actually sort of working out how the win condition works. Xerneas in this case is the win condition. If he can't kill the Xerneas, he loses. He doesn't have to kill the Smeargle, because even if the Smeargle does put his team to sleep, the Smeargle can't do anything, can't follow up from that. If the Xerneas goes down, the Xerneas goes down. So by feinting, he removes the possibility of the Xerneas protecting from the fake out. And that was a very smart play. It was still sort of risky for Thatsa to not protect, because, you know, again, the win condition. but he was able to layer his thinking and say, you know what? I don't think he's gonna fake me out here, because Xerneas is the win condition, and if I can't keep Xerneas alive, I'm gonna lose. So by expecting the feint, he ends up winning this game. And as you'll see, even though the Primal Kyogre is out, 2 Moonblasts to the face will take it out. So that, guys, is how to battle. Now, obviously, this isn't... First of all, this was script free, and I've never seen either of these 2 battles. The first battle I saw, but it's been like over 6 months since that battle happened, so I don't remember exactly. And I don't know the moveset, so it doesn't really... Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Pokemon is a game about knowledge and logic, okay? You have to understand what Pokemon do. The reason why gimmick Pokemon and stuff like the Gastrodon works is because it surprises your opponent. In a best 2 out of 3, they may give your Gastrodon +2 in the first battle, but the next 2 battles won't be as easy. So you have to understand how a Pokemon works in order to be able to beat it, and in order to apply that knowledge, you need to use logic and critical thinking. You need to understand that if that Pokemon goes for Fake Out on my Smeargle, I win. If that Pokemon fakes out my Xerneas, I lose. But then you have to think about it, okay, well, that's the basics. If he's going to fake out my Xerneas, I lose. But then you have to think, but what will my opponent do? Right? You have to think of it that way. How has my opponent been judging my battle? Is he going to expect me to protect? Is he going to expect me to just go straight for an attack? And you have to apply what you logically think that your opponent will do and work around it. It's really complicated. And that's why I was kind of hesitant to do this video, because it's hard to explain. I mean, we're sitting here for 32 minutes already, and I'm sure most of you who are first learning how to battle just really are still grasping at straws, but this is really the advanced. You get here after a while of playing. You get here by figuring out, okay, well, this is what happens when I do this. Okay, well, whatever. You know, for one of the best examples that I have that really exemplifies game knowledge is playing against a Blaziken. Whenever you play against a Blaziken, 9 times out of 10, they protect the first turn they're out. So that comes from game knowledge. I don't think I've ever fought a Blaziken that doesn't protect the first turn. It may Mega the first turn, but it doesn't protect the first turn. So utilizing that knowledge, I'm not too worried about a Blaziken that's in on the first turn. And that's how playing works. Playing takes a while to ramp up, to really understand how every Pokemon works, and just to figure out your own playstyle. But guys, if you have any questions, hit me up. The best way to learn this is to battle and watch people battle. Find people like Aaron Cybertron Zhang, Wolfie Glick. These guys are world's level players, and they really do explain their thought process as they attack and do moves. I do the same thing as well, but I'm nowhere near as good as those two. So if you really wanna sit down and do a case study, watch one or both of those two, because they will really give you a firm understanding of how to predict, how to gauge your win condition, how to gauge which Pokemon are your strongest, which Pokemon are your weakest, how to gauge the opponent's strategy, and all that jazz. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to catch you guys at the next episode. Peace.